All right, 3M, here we are, Unit 5, the last one, first lesson. Last unit, first lesson of financial math. There's a lot of terms that go along with this financial math unit, so you should be, as you should have always been, taking notes when you watch these videos. So when you're watching these videos, you should be writing down these terms because you're going to need to know them. So the first thing we're going to talk about is interest. So interest is the money that's earned by investing your money in an account or lending money to somebody else to use. When you invest your money in an account, the bank pays you interest to leave your money in the bank. Or you can lend your money to somebody else and they will pay you interest to use that money. The amount of interest earned depends on 4 things. The principal, which is a word that means the amount of money that is originally invested or the originally loaned out. The interest rate, that's the percentage rate at which the interest is earned. So the higher the percentage, the more interest you're going to earn. The time, the length of time that the money is invested for. So the longer the money is invested for, the more you're going to earn in interest. And the type of interest, simple interest versus compound interest. And we will learn the difference between the two as we work through this unit. So we're going to start with simple interest. Simple interest is the amount earned on the initial principal at a given rate of interest for a time period in years. And the formula we use to calculate it is I equals P times R times T. So to calculate the interest, you have the principal times the interest rate R times the time. Simple interest is used most commonly for less than a year. Other comment is R must be expressed as a decimal. So you have to take your percent and change it to a decimal to use the formula. So if I look at my first example, determine the simple interest if $500 is invested for 2 years at 6%. To determine the interest, I take my principal, that's the $500 I'm starting with, times it by the rate as a decimal. To change a percent to a decimal, I divide it by 100, 0.06. So I have 500 times 0.06 and times my years, times 2 years. And I get my calculator out here, and I'll multiply them all together. So 500 times 0.06 times 2, which means I'm going to get $60 interest for 2 years. Let's look at the next one. Determine the simple interest earned if $12,500 is invested for 8 months at 8.6%. So my interest is the principal, $12,500, times the interest rate as a decimal, 0.086 if you divide that by 100, times the time. Now be careful when you're doing months. Simple interest is always for years. So I have 8 months out of a whole year, which is 12 months. So the time I have to use on my formula is 8 divided by 12 because it's not a whole year that it's invested for. And then I do my 12,500 times 0.086 times 8 over 12. So we have about $716.67. Therefore, $716.67 in interest. So in addition to figuring out the interest, I equals principal times rate times time. If you know 3 out of the 4 things, you can always figure out the missing one. So in this question, I want to determine the rate if my principal of $2,000 is invested for my time of 5 months out of 12 and earns the interest of $44.17. So there's a little shortcut you can use for simple interest. There's a triangle. You know the interest is the principal times the rate times the time. So if you fill in everything you know in your triangle, my interest is $44.17. My principal is $2,000. My time is 5 months out of 12, and I have to figure out the rate. The triangle will tell us what we need to calculate. So the rate equals 44.17 over 2,000 times 5 divided by 12. So whatever's beside each other gets multiplied, and whatever's on the top gets divided. And then you type it in your calculator. So I've got 44.17 divided by 2,000 in brackets times 5 divided by 12. So 0.053, which is going to translate as a decimal for my percent. So if I want to change it back to a percent, I'm going to multiply by 100. Therefore, let me slide this down a little bit. So I'm going to multiply by 100 to get my interest rate in a percent. It's about 5.3%. So therefore, don't forget your therefore statement. 5.3% per year. All right, last one. Determine the length of time in days $3,000 was invested. So $3,000 is my principal to earn that much interest at a rate of 4% or 0.04. So if I use my triangle, my interest is $19.73. My principal is $3,000 and my rate is 0.04. And I have to figure out the time in days. Be careful. So time equals 19.73 divided by 3,000 times 0.04. Which is going to give me 19.73 divided by bracket 3,000 times 0.04 bracket equals 0.16 years. So if I want to change 0.16 years to days, I know there is 365 days in 1 year. And I have 0.6 of a year. So I take 365 times 0.616, and that'll tell me how many days. So about 60 days. So therefore, it takes about 60 days to get $19.73 interest. All right, there's simple interest. Try page 130, number 1 to 4 out of the textbook. You will need to turn in your do-a-tang and use the questions out of the yellow textbook that I will reassign you.